Hi guys, welcome back. So we are continuing the texturing process for the rest of the mushroom house. So here you can see I already put down the basic color shapes. Now we have to texture the extra details on the door. So once you actually manage to find the darker colors for the door texture, you can actually start painting. And as you can see, I am actually doing the texture painting for the door. And when you actually add a multiple color variation of hue of the same color, you will be able to add some extra details to your texturing. So this is a much easy way of variation in your texturing, and you will be able to add much more details. Now you can see I'm actually reduce the brush size, and I'm adding small details like on a real wood. And you can continue the same process throughout the entire texturing process in order to add extra small details. Here as you can see I'm actually adding some extra details on the door. As you can see in between I am making some small circle kind of designs in order to mimic the real wood kind of texturing and all. So you can say do the same thing for the rest of the models in order to add the extra details. Okay, so now we are actually almost completed the entire door modeling. Now I'm actually changing the color to a much more darker shade, and I'm actually separating the doors with a few lines. So we will be it'll be like a few wood doors, something like that it'll resemble. So it is much way of actually instead of creating the 3D model, you can actually add extra details to mimic the realism in a texturing. So that way you will be able to see much more detailed version of the models. And like I said before, you can actually use this method in order to enhance the details much more, and you can actually make much more realistic output in the texturing. So as you can see now I actually almost completed the entire door texturing, and next we'll move on to the rest of the model. So the next thing is we have to do the texturing for the rest of the bottom part, and I'm actually doing the same thing as I did on the door also. I just changed the color to a darker version, and I'm just adding few lines in order to make the texturing similar to the previous models. By doing this you will be able to add much more detailed textures, and you will be able to add variation in the texture. Instead of a plain color you will be adding much more changes in the texture. And I'm actually changed the colors also, and I'm now I'm actually adding that basic circle designs and textures on the texturing. I actually picked the color from the top part of our mushroom model in order to add the details. You can follow the same process, or you can actually uh, do your own process in order to create a different kind of texture or a design on your texturing process. So here you can see I'm actually using the both color from the top part of our mushroom in order to create the circle kind of designs on our model. So once that is done you can actually add some highlights. Here I am actually using the white color in order to add some highlights, and that will be much more useful in the final look of the 3D model. Now you can see the bottom part is almost completed. Now we have to change add some color variation in the entire texture. So I'm actually selecting a little darker version of the texture, and I'm painting it on the bottom part of our texture. So we will get a gradient effect from the top to bottom, and that will be much more realistic compared to having a plain color or a single solid color throughout the entire model. So always try to add a gradient version of texture, so you'll be able to add much more variation in the textures. So now I'm actually moving on to the top part of our mushroom. You can see that I am actually added a separate new layer in order to add the textures, and I actually created a straight line. It's actually splitting through the center of the texture, inside texture, and after that I started duplicating it. You can press Ctrl J on the keyboard to duplicate the layers, and once that is done, you can actually merge both of that layers. And once you created a few of the layers, you can actually merge all of them together, and you will be able to create multiple copies of the same design in order to uh, fill the entire texture, and it will be much more easier to continue that way. So you can see I'm actually making multiple duplicates of the same layer, and now I actually completed the entire texturing, the entire detailed texturing of that particular layer. The next thing is you can actually align them, or you can actually start changing few things here and there. Okay, once you completed the texturing, you can actually move on to the next model in order to add the details. Here you can see I'm actually experimenting with the same texture in order to add some variations and all. And once you feel that the entire texture is okay, then you can actually start to move on to the next one. Here you can see I'm actually erasing the edges of that line, so we will get a much more gradient version. Once that is done, you can change the intensity or the hue of the particular colors in order to match with the textures. Okay, now we are actually moving on to the top part of our mushroom model. So here also I'm actually selecting the brush layer, brush tool, and now you can see I'm actually uh, following the same UV, and I'm actually adding some curved lines in order to add some details. Once that is done, you can actually either you can repeat and start drawing the entire layer, or you can actually experiment with some different kind of textured brushes or something like that in order to add some dots and all. Here you can see I actually selected a textured brush, and I'm actually adding extra small dots and other kind of details. Once that is done, you can actually duplicate one of the major designs. Here you can see I'm actually duplicating the main circle which we created earlier, and after that you can actually start scaling, rotating them to add some changes, all that kind of designs and all. So once that is done, you'll be ended up with a final model with a lot of variations, lot of designs, and the final 3D model will be looking much more realistic and stylized in that way. So you can actually always experiment with the different kind of texturing and the designs and all. So only thing you have to make sure is all these designs, everything should be in different layers, so you can always come back and edit them. Once you feel that everything is finalized, only that time you can actually start merging them together. Here you can see I'm actually erasing some of the in textures, so it will not be like too much prominent in the final texturing, final image. So that way we'll be actually completing the entire texture. And now you can see I'm imported a separate texture image, which you can actually find different kind of lot of textures, images and all. And I'm using the blending mode in order to find a proper blending method. So all these kind of processes will have a much more impact on the final texture. You will not be adding too much of prominent texture on a final texture painted image. Instead you can actually add some mild texture images, and that will have a huge impact on the final look and feel of the model. Here you can see once I added the entire final the texture image, it has a really much impact on the final texturing. And I'm actually adding few colors here and there to match the entire model properly. Here you can see on the bottom top part of our bottom model, which is our trunk model of the mushroom. I actually added the color from the inside part of the mushroom model, so it will have a proper blending from the top to bottom. So that way you will be able to uh, merge the entire model together, and you can follow the same process for the entire textures, entire rest of the models to do the texture painting, everything. And you can see I actually merged all the layers together for the final texture. So you can follow the same process in order to create the texture for the rest of the models. And once I'll be doing the texturing off camera, and once you completed the entire texture, I'll see you in the next part of our video. So see you guys in the next video.